Good morning and welcome to episode 116 of Duval Rundown. My name is Gus Logue. Today I'm joined, as I am each and every Friday morning, by the one and only Hacker, who you can catch on his show Hacker After Dark each weekday evening from 8 to 10 p.m. on 92.5 and 1010 XO here in Jacksonville. Hacker, I know you'll have a very exciting show tonight with Coach Campo, probably a couple other really good interviews as you always do. But starting out here first, 9:04. Actually, it's already 9:08. Pardon me for starting the stream a little bit late, but I think at least myself, I'm still kind of trying to collect and gather my thoughts. Hacker and I did go live last night. It's not available in podcast form because it was such a long stream. But for 3 hours, myself, Hacker, and Coach Campo were on for the most part, breaking down the first half of the first round of the 2025 NFL draft, including the Jaguars' decision to trade up from the 5th overall pick to the 2nd overall pick to secure 2024 Heisman Trophy winner and two-way star Travis Hunter from Colorado. So, Hacker, welcome back. I feel like, as we were just saying before we hopped on here, it's like kind of deja vu. It feels like 5 minutes ago we were just talking on a similar stream, but it's a beautiful morning in Jacksonville, isn't it?
No, it is. It is. And you always love those mornings where you go to bed at midnight because, who could go to bed last night? You're on kind of a euphoric high from what the
Yeah.
Jaguars did. But when that kindergartner has to get up and go to school at 6 in the morning, it was an early morning for the Hacker. Let's just say that. But I'm happy to be back with you. And look, I've done a lot of, thinking about it this morning. Actually listened to our friends in Cleveland this morning on their radio broadcast. Got some interesting thoughts from what they were saying from their perspective. From the Jaguar perspective, in the movie Major League Two, Pedro Serrano hits a home run and wants to tell everybody that he's a man, basically, when he hits the home run as he's walking down the first base line. There's a great scene, iconic scene. That's what James Gladstone did last night to the NFL. You want to announce yourself here as the 34-year-old new kid on the block general manager? Do what James Gladstone did last night. Unbelievably impressive. Will it work? That's yet to be seen. But for the move itself, James Gladstone had some stones last night.
Absolutely. Yeah, I think we kind of have to start calling him Stones going forward. He had a really good quote last night. Travis Hunter spoke to local Jacksonville media for a few minutes, and then Liam Cohen and James Gladstone also met with local media at the Miller Electric Center. There's one quote that I should have clipped, honestly, but I didn't. I ran out of time, and so I'm just going to read it instead. This is from our guy Stones last night. First and foremost, we mentioned the idea that a trademark of this leadership group, when there's an opportunity to be bold, we're not going to flinch. I think this is a reflection of that. In the same lens, you've heard us mention the idea of adding people who are intangibly rich, and Travis, in fact, as a player is rare. As a person, he's also rare. Beyond that, when we say that the idea of inviting people into our ecosystem who, by being nothing more than who they are, elevate the space, is the epitome of what Travis is, we're not going to ask him to be any more than him because by doing so, he elevates not only this football team, not only the city, but the sport itself, right? Along the way, you can count on however many drafts you want to. There are players who have the capacity to alter a game. There are players who have the capacity to alter the trajectory of a team. There are very few players who have the capacity to alter the trajectory of the sport itself. And so clearly the Jaguars think they got someone like that in Travis Hunter. We're gonna again do some grading. We'll hand out a grades, especially since we didn't do it last night for both the Jaguars and the Browns. I know that some people don't like the idea of giving out immediate draft grades because a lot of times it's just kind of like solely based on fit and like team needs and like just where the player was on like most consensus big boards. And so it's not really a great way of going about it. And plus the fact that like we don't know how these players are going to pan out in the NFL. But I think it's certainly still important to go over the process that like led to what happened, what transpired last night, and whether it makes sense for both teams. And so, before we get to start into hopping into some trade grades, like any other final lingering thoughts from last night after the show, our stream ended, when you had some time to maybe do a little bit more research on Travis Hunter or hear what Liam Cohen and James Gladstone had to say, or Travis Hunter as well, what they had to say last night.
Yeah, I don't think the Jaguars gave away too much. I mean, I've seen some people locally, mostly people up in Cleveland, think, "Oh, what a great haul it was." I don't really think that. I mean, you got a second round pick 36, and you get a fourth rounder in 126, but you gave the Jaguars your fourth rounder, which is 22 spots up. So Jacksonville now, instead of having 107 and 126, has 104 and 107. They kept pick 70 and pick 88. So you're going to end up with Travis Hunter and four more picks basically in the top 105. The first round pick next year. But here's the thing, and this is what they were talking about on Cleveland radio. Oh, the Jaguars are horribly run. They're terrible. Yes, they were. Under Doug Peterson and Trent Baalke and Urban Meyer and Dave Caldwell and Gus Bradley. That wasn't Liam Cohen and James Gladstone. And I will tell you this, just listening to them up there, they will be fuming pissed in Cleveland if Jacksonville finds a way to win the AFC South, because that pick all of a sudden then becomes 25 or worse. They're banking on this being a top 10 pick next year for the Jaguars in getting their pick. And if it's anything less than a top 10, top 15 pick, I think Jacksonville won the trade, and I don't particularly think it's close. So everybody talking about Cleveland getting this great haul. The fact that Jacksonville still has 9 picks in this draft, the fact that Jacksonville, for some reason, got a fourth rounder and a sixth rounder from Cleveland in 2025 and actually moved up in the fourth round. They're 19 spots higher up than they were. Yeah, I have zero problem with what they gave away in this deal.
Yeah, I agree with you. And to answer a question that we got on Twitter from Kyle, how early does our 2026 first have to be for the trade to look bad right away? I think you nailed it. Where like as long as they're not picking in the top 10, it'll be pretty tough to like have a losing season in 2025 and then have to give up a top 10 selection. But I mean, as long as Travis Hunter like works out like individually himself, even if like the Jaguars have a top 10 pick, but Travis Hunter is a superstar, then like I think that you can still kind of chalk it up as, if not a win for Jacksonville, at least kind of like an even draw. But I certainly agree with everything you're saying, but go ahead.
Here's how you have to think about it, Gus. All right. So who are we talking about in this process? Mason Graham. Let's use Mason Graham as an example. And let's say Jacksonville goes, we'll say 7, 8, 8 and 9, right in the middle of the pack. 8 and 9, misses the playoffs and is picking 14th next year. Conceivable, right? That's a top 15 pick. If I would have told you last night, would you trade Mason Graham and the 14th best player in the draft in 2026 for Travis Hunter? I think across the board, anybody watching this would have said yes. Absolutely.
Yeah. And a big
That's
reason,
the way you have to think about this.
Absolutely. And a big reason is because Travis Hunter plays two positions. Like I know that some people are like, oh, you like got two players in one pick. So like it doesn't like you spent 2 first rounders and then pretty much an early second rounder in terms of value in order to move up for Travis Hunter. But like you got like almost multiple players out of that. And the thing is that like even if Hunter isn't truly going to be a two-way superstar, he has like a uniquely high floor because he does play two positions. If for whatever reason it doesn't work out for him on one side of the ball, then there's should be a really good chance that he can just stick to one position and at least be like an above average player at a minimum. And so again, like I think that generally speaking, when you're trading this kind of compensation for especially a non-quarterback, it can kind of raise a lot of eyebrows. But because of the floor that Hunter has, obviously because of the ceiling that Hunter has, because this makes sense for Jacksonville in terms of it's a new regime. They wanted to make a statement. They wanted to be bold. And then in terms of when you look at the draft, like there's obviously a big drop off in terms of consensus, at least from Travis Hunter and Abdul Carter, who's a third pick to the Giants, and everyone after that. And so like there's just a lot of sound reasoning, I think. And there was a quote from Shad Khan going around last night. I don't think he spoke to any media last night, at least not locally in Jacksonville. So I'm not sure exactly where the quote came from, but there was a quote that was floating around that said that Khan has like already tried the strategy of recouping a bunch of picks, of building up draft capital, and like look at where it's gotten the Jaguars. They're coming off their third. Like they've been taking a top 10 player in the draft for like 15 of the past 18 years or something crazy like that. Like it just hasn't been a working strategy for them. And so obviously, like maybe with a new regime that does things a little bit differently, like I think we can all agree that like having more at bats is always a good thing because it raises your chances of just hitting on multiple players or players in general. But like I think that when the Jaguars, when James Gladstone and Tony Baselli and Liam Cohen went to Shad Khan and said, "Hey, Shad, like we're thinking about this. What are your thoughts?" He said, "Let's do it because like we've tried the like we have like a lot of draft capital, we have a lot of swings to the plate, and again, like that is generally a good strategy, but it just hasn't worked out for Jacksonville, and so I think it's really interesting that." The approach that they had, especially because you know that James Gladstone does like more at bats. He said that at the NFL Combine, and the Jaguars have been a pretty analytically heavy usage or whatever team for years now, in large part because of Shad Khan's son Tony Khan. And then Gladstone himself is bringing over even more kind of analytics and just like a better understanding of the game from a numbers perspective. And so the fact that they're like certainly one of the analytics heavy organizations in the league, I would say, and still said F them picks is like, I see the vision. I think it makes total sense. I think that's pretty much all I have to say on like the reasoning behind the Hunter deal. I think that, yeah, you can nitpick at the value. There was actually a tweet going around last night and this morning from a guy that is, I just won't even say his name, but he's like a NFL data analyst basically. And he was saying that even if the Jaguars win the Super Bowl, from a value standpoint, the Browns are always going to win that trade. But like the Super Bowl is the whole point. Like we're trying to get to parades here. Like if the Jaguars win the Super Bowl, then they won the trade, point blank, period. That's the end of the conversation. And so like people like that is like analytics people can sometimes get a bad rap because their head is so far into the spreadsheets that they kind of forget what the goal is. But I don't think that there was any scenario even close to being as good as this one for the Jaguars in terms of trading up and securing a franchise player, a pillar of the organization, a star on two areas of the field that the Jaguars did need. And like, there's not premier cornerbacks or premier wide receivers just like walking around in free agency or even being available in trade. Like these guys, even just at one position is crazy rare. And so it's the rarest to be able to get Travis Hunter. So I certainly think that it was worth the compensation.
No, that was Warren Sharp that said that, and I like Warren. I've had him on my show a lot, and he's wrong. I mean, that is a ludicrous statement to say that even if Jacksonville wins the Super Bowl, meaning Cleveland gets the 32nd pick, Cleveland still wins the trade because of the decimal points. Well, okay, whatever. I mean, that if that's your outlook on life, and if I have Warren on again, and I hope I do, I will tell him that that's ridiculous. But again, Jacksonville, you still have pick 70 tonight. You have pick 88 tonight. You all of a sudden now have two really high fourth round picks in 104 and 107. You're going to get four more guys at least that are going to contribute, and then you have an additional 5 picks after that. So the fact that they still have 10 picks in the draft, now including Travis Hunter, is a really good job by James Gladstone. And again, this team won the division 2 years ago. They were going to win the division up until Thanksgiving in 2023 before the year went to hell. And then obviously last year was a disaster. They're not as bad as 4-13. We've heard Cohen and Gladstone say that time and time again. And I'll go back to what I said, and this is what I'm going to say for the longest time. Put Mason Graham in a Jaguar uniform at number 5. Say they didn't move out last night. Mason Graham. In 2025, they go 8-9, which is certainly conceivable, meaning they're the 14th or 15th pick. There isn't one person watching, I don't believe, that if I would have told you, I'll give you Mason Graham and pick 15 in 2026 for Travis Hunter. That is the way you have to think about this. Now, if they suck this year and it's the number 1 pick next year, well, then that's a different conversation. But I don't expect them to have the number 1 pick next year. I think I'm being a little harsh in saying 7-10, 8-9, and pick 14. I expect them to be competing for the division in 2025 in large part because the division sucks.
Yeah. To reiterate your point about the draft picks, that was a really good point by you on the stream last night to talk about the fact that they still have those 4 relatively early picks in the 3rd round, in the early 4th round. So just to recap Jacksonville's picks now, they had the second overall pick, which they used on Travis Hunter. Their next picks are pick 70 in the third round, pick 88 in the third round, pick 104 in the fourth, 107 in the fourth, pick 142 in the fifth, pick 182 in the sixth, pick 194 in the sixth, pick 200 in the sixth, and pick 221 in the seventh. So again, as you were saying, they have 10 total picks still. Even after the Travis Hunter trade, they enter the draft with 10 picks. And even after having to trade up for Travis Hunter, they still have 10 total picks in the 2025 draft, including the Travis Hunter pick. And so they'll still have the ability, even if they lost their 36 overall second round selection, they will be able to continue to add to the floor and the depth of this roster.
Well, quickly. I mean, you're a smart guy, Gus. What's 6 times, we'll say 30 to make it easy? I mean, it's
180.
180, right. The Jaguars have 6 of the top 142. All right. So if you go 32 times 6, there's 32 NFL teams. What are you talking? Almost 180, 88, 190 roughly. And the Jaguars have 6 of the top 142 players, including Travis Hunter. And you're going to get 5 more in the top 142. Again, as I think more and more about it, I'm talking more and more about it. As long as they're not god awful in 2025 and it's not a top 10 or dare I say a top 5 pick next year, the Jaguars won this draft. They can say whatever they want in Cleveland and make themselves feel better. The Jaguars fleeced Cleveland a little bit last night.
Let's get to Cleveland's perspective in just a second here, but first let's hand out some grades for the Jaguars. I was originally thinking like B+ or A- territory for Jacksonville because I think that selecting Travis Hunter in itself is certainly like an A+ scenario and deserves an A+ grade in my mind. And I was only knocking the Jaguars because even though I don't think the compensation for them is like unfair or bad or anything like that, they did have to spend multiple draft picks in order to take one player. But at the end of the day, like I don't think I should like ding the Jaguars for that because like if they had a realistic opportunity to get Travis Hunter at 5th overall and then they like kind of more so wasted draft capital in order to make sure that they got him, then I'll ding it a little bit. But like Travis Hunter was not going to make it to the 5th overall pick, even despite the rumors that were coming out like a month or two ago that he might fall. He's always going to be the 2nd overall pick in the draft. He's always going to be the first non-quarterback taken in this draft. And so the Jaguars did what they had to do in order to secure that guy. And so I'm trying to be like as unbiased as I can, but like you're saying, like the more that I think about it, the more that I think it's a good deal for the Jaguars. So I would give them an A for this. What do you think?
A+. It's
Yeah.
an A+. And I'm never, and you know this, and goodness knows the listeners and viewers know this, I'm never ultra positive Jaguar guy. I mean, I have been ridiculed and ripped on social media for years about Hacker, you're too negative, and this, that, and the other. Well, you call it negative, I call it reality. When the team sucks, I'm going to tell you they suck, and they've sucked for the better part of the last 15 years. So don't confuse me for sunshine and rainbows guy. Having said that, it's an A+. Because to make a splash like they did for Gladstone and Cohen to do that. Now, it's an A+ in April, right? Talk to me in November. We'll see it. But if Travis Hunter is the guy that we all believe that he is, and with what we've talked about, with to me the quite frankly lack of compensation, particularly if Jacksonville's good in 2025, it's an A+, man. I got zero problems with what the Jaguars did last night. I commend James Caldwell. I commend James Gladstone. I commend Liam Cohen, Tony Baselli, everybody involved. It was an absolute coup what they pulled off last night.
Yeah, shout out Stones. Let's get to the Cleveland side just to kind of like round out the conversation. And even though, again, as we're saying, we're trying to come at this conversation as unbiased as possible, but to do that in full, I think we need to talk about just Cleveland's perspective and their side of things. So you mentioned at the top that you were listening to Cleveland radio this morning. So like, what were your takeaways on what they were saying? Do you agree, disagree, and just general thoughts on the Browns' process of trading down and ending up not drafting Travis Hunter, but rather getting Michigan defensive tackle Mason Graham with the 5th pick?
I mean, they're spinning it for their audience, right? It's what you do.
True.
And some could. I mean, if you're watching this in Cleveland right now, if you're watching me in Cleveland right now, you could say, "Oh, the Jacksonville media guys spinning it for their audience." So it's whatever mindset you want to have. At the end of the day, they could have had what many consider to be the number 1 wide receiver and number 1 DB in the draft combined in Travis Hunter. and they chose not to do that. Now, I'm curious to see what they do with 36 and what they do, obviously, next year. We'll have to wait a while for that. Mason Graham's a fine player, but they took an interior defensive lineman instead of a stud playmaker. We'll see what they do with 36. But it's not a failure for Cleveland because they did get an extra first round pick next year, which I certainly understand that. I would give them a B plus. What's interesting is if you listen to their fans in Cleveland, the fans are pissed.
They're sick.
The fans are pissed. Now, the media, our friends up at 92.3 and ESPN in Cleveland, and I like a lot of those guys. I'm hoping to have one of those guys on my show tonight. They're much higher on this deal for the Browns than their fans are. Because I looked on Cleveland message boards last night, and they were fired up. But no, it's not a failure. I think it's probably a B plus for Cleveland, I think, depending on what they do with 36 and obviously how it turns out next year. But again, if the Jaguars win the division, which is conceivable, or if the Jaguars are a 500 team or better, and that first round pick turns out to be outside the top 15, or dare I say outside the top 20, well, at that point, to me, the grade would go down a little bit. Because what Cleveland's doing, the quarterbacks this year were terrible. They want to get their franchise quarterback next year. So they want to accumulate picks. So they have 2 first rounders, right? Well, all right, if you have 2 top 10 or 2 top 15 picks, well, then maybe you can move up to take whatever quarterback you want. But if you have a number 10 pick and a number 26 pick, that might not help you get that franchise quarterback next year. So, yeah, it'll be very interesting to see how it plays out. But I'd probably give him a B plus.
I was thinking more like C, just a flat average grade, because it does make sense that they want a 2026 first rounder to be able to draft a quarterback or move up to draft a quarterback in next year's 2026 class, especially since it seems a very strong quarterback class, especially relative to this year's quarterback class. And so like that makes sense on the purpose, but like at the end of the day, you're like just turning down a statement player for like the idea of a quarterback next year, and like who knows what'll happen. Obviously, like I think the Browns are a little bit hamstrung for a few different reasons, and one of the reasons is like Deshaun Watson's contract situation. I wonder if they would have liked to seek a bigger upgrade at the quarterback position this offseason, but like it might not have made sense in terms of like their finances and their books and the team timeline. That like it might make more sense to just try to be completely rid of the Deshaun Watson contract next offseason, bring in a completely new face, and just kind of like start a new era in 2026.
Well, they might draft Shedeur Sanders at 33 tonight.
That's true. Yeah, we'll have to see. And so I think they were like a little bit, maybe hamstrung isn't the perfect word, but like the quarterback situation was obviously at the forefront for Cleveland, and that's understandable. But like it just like made them pass on a generational player. And I think the real reason that they are hamstrung to me, or a possible reason that I keep going back to, is the whole Myles Garrett situation, where I was convinced that Myles Garrett was not going to suit up in a Cleveland Browns uniform again after he requested a trade following the 2024 season. They ended up getting a deal done this offseason to make him the highest paid non-quarterback in the league. No surprises there. Mammoth contract for Myles to stay in Cleveland. But like, I wonder how much like power Myles now has. I saw a tweet that was from a source, and so it's not like it was just like a fan speculating that Myles Garrett like handpicked Mason Graham. And I think that everyone thought that Abdul Carter would be a potential option for Cleveland just because it would be another pass rushing threat next to Myles Garrett. And so I think that Myles Garrett, like maybe part of like I'm sure it wasn't written in the contracts, but I think maybe part of the understanding when he re-signed in Cleveland was that like he was going to have a voice. He was going to be able to tell ownership and tell the general manager and tell the front office like what was on his mind and what he thinks would help. And I don't think this move helps the Browns, honestly. I think it might help them get a better quarterback next year. It certainly helps Myles Garrett because now there's like an interior threat next to him and Mason Graham. But like holistically for the franchise, does it really help you not taking Travis Hunter? And so there's certainly pros and cons for the Browns in this trade, but like I'm just landing on like a straight C, because to me, like having the second overall pick and not leaving with Travis Hunter or Abdul Carter is crazy to me. Maybe like even beyond Myles Garrett, the Browns truly believe that Mason Graham was in a tier closer to those top two guys than a lot of other people, including us, thought of Mason Graham. And so, yeah, I think they were a little bit hamstrung and had a lot of things to consider. And on the opposite side, the Jaguars were not hamstrung, as James Gladstone said both last night, but also multiple times this offseason. When there's an opportunity to be bold, they won't flinch. And they didn't flinch last night. I feel like Cleveland flinched a little bit last night. And so I'll give them a flat C. We both gave the Jaguars an A. Hacker, any other thoughts on the Jaguars? I guess I've got one more kind of lingering thought on like the impact of Travis Hunter being in Jacksonville. But any other thoughts on the Browns or the grades or anything else?
Well, I just think, only 10% of the draft right now is done for Jacksonville. They got 9 picks to go. They got 2 tonight. They got 7 tomorrow. Again, 70, 88, 104, and 107 are their next 4 picks. 2 in the 3rd round, 2 pretty early in the 4th round. It'll be really interesting to see what James Gladstone does. And I'm all in. Gus, if I wasn't all in before, man, I have put all my matchsticks in because again, stones. We need to get the shirts made up. Just call them stones because that was some stones last night from a 34-year-old general manager. And just watching that guy at his press conference, watching him and Cohen and the way they interact, we've seen Gus Bradley and Dave Caldwell up there. We've seen Urban Meyer and Trent Baalke up there. We've seen Gene Smith and Mike Mularkey up there. And recently it was Doug Peterson and Trent Baalke. I cannot begin to tell you how refreshing it is to see 2 guys look like they're on the same page, joking with each other, look like they're genuinely friends and not just putting on faces for the cameras that are in front of them. It's a new day here in Jacksonville. And as we talked about, Trevor Lawrence, Brian Thomas Jr., Travis Hunter, Trayvon Walker, Hines Allen. I mean, good grief, man. You want to talk about some star value, some names on the Jacksonville Jaguars. I don't know if it's going to result in wins. That's the next goal. But as far as name value and recognition, it's pretty good, man. It's pretty good.
Next 3 years, would you rather have Jamar Chase and T. Higgins or Brian Thomas Jr. and Travis Hunter Jr.?
The fact that that's even a conversation is a win for the Jaguars.
Yep, I agree.
Again, I would probably go Cincinnati because it's 2 proven guys in the NFL. But I'll tell you this, you list all 32 teams right now, and you list their 2 starting wide receivers, Brian Thomas Jr. and Travis Hunter aren't going to be that far down the list. They're going to be in the top half, maybe even the top 10. And Travis Hunter hasn't even played a game yet in the NFL.
Yeah, it is definitely worth a conversation. It'll be a lot of fun to continue that specific conversation throughout the season once we actually see Travis Hunter suit up in a Jaguars uniform. On the other side of the ball, just real quick, one of my lingering thoughts is like, what does this mean for Jarian Jones? Because we all, after the Jordan Lewis signing in free agency, Jordan Lewis is primarily a slot nickel cornerback, and that's primarily what Jarian Jones played last offseason. And so there was a lot of uncertainty, including from Jarian himself. He actually said on Helmets and Heels. You can look at the interview that Jarian did with Helmets and Heels on our YouTube page. It's about 25 minutes long. Really good interview, really good sit down with Jarian. And he said himself that he was surprised because he was like, what does this mean for me? But then he had some really good conversations with the coaching staff, with defensive coordinator Anthony Campanile talking about, and even Liam Cohen too, talking about how he wants to play a little bit more outside as a cornerback and not just be relegated to the slot. And so the expectation was that Jarian Jones and Jordan Lewis would be kind of versatile, potentially inside-outside cornerbacks to be able to pair as the number 2 and number 3 guys behind Tyson Campbell on the cornerback depth chart. But now all of a sudden, like, even if Travis Hunter is playing like about 50% or even 30% of defensive snaps in year 1, I feel like Jarian Jones is kind of the odd man out now. I'm not necessarily saying he's going to like get traded or like be disgruntled or anything like that, but I just kind of feel for him because I was looking forward to watching more of Jarian Jones this season.
I think Travis Hunter is going to be a wide receiver first. They talked about that last night.
Yeah.
The idea that he can play full-time wide receiver and DB, I don't think is plausible. I've said that repeatedly. Can you have packages in there, or if it's, a game coming down to the wire and you just need somebody to be out there as an athlete to stop a 2-minute drill, and he's familiar enough with the defense. But again, the idea that Travis Hunter, let's say opening day, right? You play in Houston, right? Opening drive, Travis Hunter has 3 catches for 27 yards. Jaguars go 9 plays, get a field goal. You're telling me Hunter's going to come off the field, get a splash of Gatorade, and go right back out there to guard Nico Collins? I don't know about that. I mean, that's a tall order. But I think what you said is spot on. Even if he falls into one position at some point and the writing's on the wall where it just can't work out at both spots, you've either gotten a really, really good wide receiver or a really, really good defensive back. And I'm totally, totally fine with that.
His development, especially in year one, will be really interesting to monitor because, as we discussed on last night's stream with Coach Campo, Hunter is like more pro ready as a cornerback prospect. He spent more time, I think, in meeting rooms, kind of developing his technique. One of the many good things about Hunter and on his profile is the fact that like he's always been a rare athlete, but he's been better and improved technically at both positions, receiver and cornerback, each year that he's been in college. And so you can, even if growth isn't linear, you can expect for him to continue to develop, but especially as a wide receiver. And so it'll be interesting because, again, I think he's more ready to contribute right away as a cornerback. But obviously, when you've got Liam Cohen as a first-time coach and Trevor Lawrence as the franchise quarterback, you want to be able to maximize the offense and you want to maximize Travis Hunter's effect on offense. And so I do expect him to be pretty much a full-time receiver and being in mostly offensive meeting rooms, especially throughout the offseason. And then we'll see just how quickly he's able to ramp up from a limited part-time package on defense to potentially being a full-time player. I think that certainly a lot of people have doubts, and like that's understandable, but I don't know. Just because something hasn't been done before doesn't mean it isn't possible. And so it'll be really exciting to see what Travis Hunter makes possible for the Jacksonville Jaguars here. Hacker, I'm looking forward to your show tonight. I guess you're pretty much going to be doing another live stream starting at 8 with the second round of the draft starting at 7, right?
Yeah, Dave Campo, the head coach, will be in studio with me. Hacker After Dark, 8 o'clock, 1010XL and 92.5 FM. We hope to have Travis Hunter's high school coach join us tonight. I'm working on that. I'm also going to try to get somebody up in Cleveland to kind of get the reaction, the lay of the land up there. But yeah, the head coach will be with me 8 o'clock to 10 o'clock tonight during rounds 2 and round 3, where the Jaguars, of course, have 2 draft picks tonight, 70 and 88.
Awesome. All right, well, check out Hacker After Dark tonight. Check out Duval Rundown future episodes. I will be back at 9:04 a.m. Eastern on Monday. On the Monday episodes have been mock drafts, and so I'll have to figure out something new for Monday's episode, but we'll be coming with something. Appreciate everyone for watching, listening, commenting. We've got plenty of Jaguars and Travis Hunter content, obviously, throughout all of our 1010XL platforms and social media channels. And so stay tuned, but appreciate everyone who's been tuned in. Hacker, thanks as always for coming on, and I'll talk to you next time. Peace, guys.